Okay, welcome back now to the last readings of this week. We're going to be in Genesis chapters 37 through 44. Kind of a long story here of Joseph as we get through the end part of Genesis. And so we find that Joseph is the next to the last son of Jacob. Jacob and his family now are back in Canaan, and this is some years have passed now. So Joseph is 17 years old, and he gets in trouble with his brothers, and they're jealous of him. As you read through, you find that they plan to, first of all, they plan to kill him by putting him in a pit, and then they decide not to do that. So they sell him to a Midianite caravan, and the Midianites take him on to Egypt, and that is where he is then sold into slavery to Potiphar. And so the story goes in chapter 37, of course, that's where his brothers plan to kill him and sell him. And so they wind up doing that. What they wound up doing actually was to sell him to the Midianites. They took his cloak, the varicolored tunic, and they soaked it with blood and took it back to Jacob, showed it to him, said, "Oh, this son is dead, and the lions or bears or something ate him." And so Jacob then mourns over him for a very, very long time. So anyway, so we pick up here now this story of Joseph in 37. That gets us started. Now this is an interesting break right here. Chapter 38. Chapter 38 here is Judah and Tamar. And this is the interesting story here is it has nothing really to do with Joseph. It's so sort of stuck in there. And so we find that God at this point is telling us that he can walk and chew gum. He can do two things at once. And so we see as we move through this chapter 38, we know that Judah takes Canaanite wife. He has two sons, and Chezib. Takes a wife, Tamar. Dies, and Tamar is now a widow. She plays the part of one of the prostitutes. Judah goes into her, and she tricks him a little bit here, and all of a sudden Judah now understands that he is the father of Tamar's children. Now we get through this, you get down to verses 27 through 30. This is where we pay attention, because Tamar has two sons, Perez and Zerah. Pay attention to that, because Perez is a player here. So when you finish reading this story right here, and this is in chapter 38, what I want you to do is go to Ruth Chapter 4, verses 18 through 22. And all of a sudden you'll see where God is already started on the kingdom of David. The nation of Israel doesn't exist yet. This is just a family. They hadn't been through the period of judges. They hadn't made the occupation of the land, yet God right here has already started on King David. So this is where we see the omniscience and omnipresence of God. I kind of say that he can walk and chew gum. He can do two things at once. So he's got this plan going on as it is. So then in chapter 39, we go back to Joseph. And we see two different places where Joseph has his integrity now is being proved. First of all, he's sold into Potiphar's house, and his integrity, Potiphar understands it. Eventually, Potiphar puts him over his whole house with the exception of his wife, who in turn wants to lay with Joseph, but he won't do it, and his integrity is still strong there. So she frames him. And after she frames him, he winds up in jail. So he had his first adventure in Potiphar's house with his wife. And then the second time here, all of a sudden, Joseph winds up in jail. He finds himself in a position that he's going to have to rely on God again. So he proves his integrity again to the jailer. The jailer then puts him in charge of the entire jail and all of the prisoners that are in there. So Joseph has proven himself once more. This is not for just because. This is God building Joseph for a different mission. So he does that. The jailer puts him in charge. Now, at that point, we see in chapter 40 where the baker and the cupbearer wind up in jail with Joseph. They have their dreams, and Joseph interprets both of those dreams. To that fact, both dreams came true. It was that the cupbearer wound up getting restored, and the baker was hanged for his sins against Pharaoh. So Joseph, his integrity and the ability for this Hebrew kid, this Hebrew man, is able to interpret dreams. And Joseph asked him, said, if you get out of here, remember me. But evidently they did not, and Joseph wound up remaining in the jail for over 2 years. And that is God's working again with Joseph, preparing him for a certain place and a certain time. So that's that first day's reading. And then we move over to the second day's reading here, and we begin in chapter 41. So Pharaoh has his dreams. He has 2 dreams, but they are one and the same, the dream of the cows and the dream of the ears of corn. It's the fat years and the lean years, 7 fat years, 7 lean years. So Joseph is brought out of the prison, and he interprets the dreams for Pharaoh. And after the interpretation, and Joseph gives him advice to prepare now for those lean years. In other words, take this bounty of the fat years and prepare and be ready so there will be food in Egypt for the 7 lean years. And so they look around. They could not find a man that they could put in charge of that. So guess what? The integrity of Joseph again. And so all of a sudden, from being the number 2 in Pharaoh's house and the number 2 in the jail, now he's number 2 over all of Egypt. So he is now taking care of the entire nation of Egypt. And Pharaoh has given him charge of everything except for his own throne. So that's God's working with Joseph. Joseph would make that statement to his brothers on down the road that it was not for their sinfulness that put him there. It was God put him there for a particular reason. So he would make that statement. So then, after he had already made those plans, he had already made the preparations, now the famine itself is in Canaan. And Jacob sends Joseph's brothers, and sends them on down to Egypt to buy grain. And from that point on, all the way from chapter 42, 43, 44, and into 45, all these chapters have to do with Joseph. He is now tormenting his brothers. He's kind of teaching them a lesson, and he's kept them on edge the whole time. The end of the story is actually in chapters 45 through 50. Joseph reveals to his brothers what his purpose was. And that's the beginning of the building of the nation of Israel. Brother Tim will go through that as you begin that read, chapters 45 through 50, next week at the beginning. And it is a perfect transition from the book of Genesis over to Exodus, where there is some almost 400 years of history that all of a sudden is just skipped through really fast into the next time that God begins to move with the full nation of Israel, from the 70 that move into the land of Goshen to the 600,000 men that come out of it. So I pray, God, that He will be with you, help you to read and understand this, and I pray, God, that you stay with it. Do not abandon it. Keep up. This is very fast. We're moving really quick through these readings. So make up your mind ahead of time that you're going to stay with this and provide the time to God each and every day. And we pray that God will have His blessings on the reading of His Word. And we'll see you next time.